Hi, welcome back to Exploring Politics. I'm your host, Peter Rapp, and today we are bringing you a special post-election episode where we break down all the fine details of the past election. Please stay tuned. Welcome back. As I said, we are going to be breaking down all the very fine details of this past election just 2 days ago on Tuesday. We are going to go over how the outcome was reached and what this means for the future of America. That part will likely be more opinionated, but first I will introduce all of the panelists who are with us today. Would you like to go first, MJ?
Absolutely. My name is MJ Griffin. I am the president of Democracy Matters here at LaSalle. I am also an election worker. I work the polls during election day, and I'm very excited to talk about my experience.
All right, thank you. Matt, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Matthew Bera. I'm a freshman here at LaSalle, and I compete in mock trial, and I'm majoring in political science.
Thank you. Now, Dezlen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Dezlen Long. I'm a sophomore history and political science double major here at LaSalle University, and I am also the president of our Histories Club, as well as first-time voter.
All right. Well, I'm very glad to have all of you here today for this definitely interesting discussion. There's a lot to go over here. So let's start with, I think, the question on everyone's mind. The outcome of this election is very different from what was being expected. It was expected that it would be pretty close, that it might be similar to 2016 with one candidate winning the popular vote, but not the Electoral College. But what we saw was Donald Trump won the popular vote by a decently large margin that people weren't expecting, and winning the Electoral College by, again, a pretty significant margin. Do any of you have any ideas that you would like to focus on for how that might have occurred?
It's historically seen that when the economy is doing poorly, the incumbent president tends to lose. Because Kamala was an extension of President Joe Biden, I can understand where this loss came from. What was shocking to me was the gap. But something else that should be noted that I am personally extremely disappointed in is only 66% of eligible voters voted in this election. And I think that has a large reason that's a large reason of why the outcome was the way it was. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of people voted with economics in mind. I think a lot of people we'll go into this later about the economic aspects. I don't want to go too much right now. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of this is around the economy presently.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and we definitely will go very into detail on the economics. There, we will have definitely plenty to discuss there, but now we'll jump to Matt. Do you have any thoughts on how this might have happened?
Yes, I think this election was, at its core, a full-scale repudiation of the Biden-Kamala era policies. A lot of us thought that this election would be close. I was certainly one of them. I had no idea what to think, no idea who won. A lot of people had a kind of gut feelings, but that was really all we were going by. But when you actually look at the issues that were of primary concern to voters, like MJ pointed out, it's actually kind of clear that Trump, I think, was expected to win. It's easy to say that looking back, but the main issues of importance to voters by all available polling, number one was the economy. Immigration was a key issue. Violent crime was a key issue. When all of these things are key issues, I don't think that really boded well for Biden and Kamala, because most voters didn't like the policies, don't like how they address these issues.
Got it. Thank you. Now, Des, do you have anything to
I like Matt said, looking back on it, with Matt and MJ said, I actually absolutely agree when you look at things in the grand scheme. I mean, in terms of the economy, I talk to people, the first thing they say to me when I talk to them about, why are you choosing Trump over Biden? Life was better for me when I was under Trump. I didn't have to pay X amount of money for groceries. I didn't have to pay X amount of money for gas and this and that. Everything was cheaper. I didn't have any problems. I got to go home, live my life, and enjoy myself. And so I can understand that. I can understand it economically, looking back on the election and seeing what happened. Now, and definitely in terms of the immigration, the border, we had a candidate up there for president, a Democratic candidate, who, when asked about the border, I believe it was a few years ago, earlier in this election cycle, back when she was still vice president, say, I'll get down there eventually to it. I'll figure it out eventually what we're going to do down there. And so people are fed up. Yes, you have illegal immigrants crossing the borders, and yes, I won't try to get into that too much now, but some of them may be committing violent crimes in these cities. It might not the majority of them, but a lot of the American people, when they hear that and see that all the different things going on in our cities, I mean, even during the debate that we had, we all remember the Springfield migrants. They're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats. People are getting fed up, and they see when they have these rhetorics there in their face about the things that are going on with the economy and with the border, they want to have change. And so, like Matt and MJ both said, Pete, they're fed up with these Biden and Harris plans, and they wanted something new. Even though something new is something we've already seen before.
Yeah, I think you're right to mention that word change. This is, I think, to me, it seems pretty clear that what happened is we saw in the data that the reason why Harris lost was not because Trump had an outpouring of voters that he had not previously had. He has less votes, I believe, than he did in 2020, but Harris had, I think, something like 20 million less than Biden did. And I think what that has to come down to is people are not enthusiastic about a continuance. Harris did stand for a continuance on Biden's economic policy, which Democratic campaigning said, well, the economy is actually doing great. And if you look at the pure macro level economics, that might be true, but for an individual level, most people's lived experiences will not reflect that. Housing prices are going up, cost of goods are up for most people. So I think that the reason why we saw such a low turnout for Harris was in combination with, we can get into the Gaza issue and people abstaining from voting for Harris due to her stance on that. I think a large amount of votes were lost by standing as a pure continuation. It kind of lost her the identity of hope and change that allowed Biden to win after 4 years of Trump. So I think that is a pretty solid reason. Do you want to go further into any ideas you touched on earlier?
I would say, largely speaking, a lot of Americans don't have an idea about how the economy works.
Yes.
I think they understand how it works on the micro level. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I will say for Trump and for Biden is, largely speaking, the issues with inflation are more monetary fiscal policy. This inflation, let's not forget the COVID pandemic, began when he mismanaged it. And furthermore, both him and Biden, those stimulus packages that went out, those also fanned the flames of inflation. It was the both of them. It was those universal basic income checks. So I think with the economic policy, I don't think a lot of Americans understand how these economic policies are going to affect them. Because when we go into what his plan is, while the continuation of Biden has its flaws, I will fully give you that, 100% has its flaws. Kamala's plan has its flaws. But my concern is that a lot of people don't understand what the flaws of the Trump plan is. Yeah. And I think it's going to come back and it's going to bite them.
I think it very well may. Matt, do you have any thoughts on that before we go to break?
Sure. I would say that a lot of Americans do, not to disagree because I see your point, but I think a lot of Americans do see that a lot of Joe Biden's policies were the proximate causes of a lot of the problems that we've been having. For example, on his first day in office, Joe Biden famously canceled the Keystone XL pipeline. And then we see over the course of this period of time, gas prices are going up. We're not importing enough petroleum. Under Donald Trump, we were energy independent. We were a net exporter of petroleum, and then under Biden, that all changed. So I think Americans do see that there's sort of a causation between Joe Biden's policies and a lot of the economic downturn that we've seen as a result. And as I say before, I think that they want a change. Donald Trump was fundamentally a change candidate, just like Joe Biden was in 2020.
Des, do you have any final thoughts?
Matt, you said something about we're seeing the causation of Joe Biden's day one policies, but I think that when Donald Trump has his day one policies, we're going to be seeing the causation of that. Now, tariffs aren't something that are, a day one policy, but that is something that he's been spending his entire campaign saying he wants to put in place. And I mean, American people, like MJ said, are going to be suffering when those tariffs get put place onto day one. We are going to be the ones spending more and more money, and it'll be even worse than inflation already is. And so it's like we complain so much about this one issue that we're biting a bullet and are going to have us be shot even worse in the back because of it.
Well, I mean, what tariffs do, though, is they bring jobs back into the American economy. I think it's well, it is. That's the reason. That's why Trump is a protectionist, because he wants to protect American jobs.
Protectionism only works to a certain extent. What this is, in my opinion, is mercantilism. When you take away trade, you heighten the cost of goods. This is going to come back, and it is going to raise inflation. That's just how inflation works. That's how tariffs work. And ultimately, it's going to be the middle class that's going to bite the bullet for this. The wealthy people, they'll be fine. It's the tariffs that the people who own these businesses are going to be fine. It is the people who are going to be most affected by these tariffs, who are going to lose their jobs, who are going to not be able to afford things. That is going to be the result of these tariffs, because we saw it happen in his last trade war.
I think that we are having a very important discussion here on the tariffs, and we will continue that after this very brief break. So we are going to go to a quick break, and then we will be back to discuss in further detail the tariffs. There's a lot to discuss there. Please stay tuned.
It's hard to always know what's going on with your kids. The Talk They Hear You mobile app and Screen for Success tool can help. The mobile app shows you how to turn everyday situations into opportunities to talk with your kids about alcohol and other drugs. Screen for Success helps you find out if your child needs more support by asking about their health, wellness, and well-being. Keep your kids safe and healthy. Download the free Talk They Hear You mobile app and start using Screen for Success today.
We live in a country that incarcerates its own people more than any other nation in the world.
The individual can age out of crime. He or she, 9 times out of 10, is no longer thinking like he or she once thought when they were 18. This is a good time to have a second look for everyone. We have 50 years of data that proves to us emphatically that the old way of doing things no longer works.
Dear University of...
Thank you for your offer
to become student ID number 283471.
While I appreciate your desire
For my impeccable academic record,
I must decline the opportunity
to get a generic degree,
I've decided to tell my story.
to be a student, not a statistic.
I wish you good luck in the future.
as I embark on mine.
Hello and welcome back to this post-election episode of Exploring Politics. We just left off with a very heated discussion on tariffs, and I mean, that comes with the territory. Tariffs are something that are very controversial, and I think it is one of Trump's most contested policies, definitely his most economically. What a tariff basically is it is a tax on imported goods. The importer pays the tax on the goods in addition to the cost of importing it. So what this does is it's supposed to incentivize them to purchase more American-made goods. So now we will go back to the discussion we were having when we left off. I believe MJ had just finished speaking. Matt or Des, would you like to respond?
Sure, I'll start out. I mean, I think what's good for the goose is good for the gander. I think Kamala Harris has proposed policies that would be incredibly detrimental to American jobs. For example, Kamala has advocated for price controls. This is not going to be at all helpful to American workers. In fact, if this were to be implemented, which realistically, if she were president, I don't think that would ever go through, then this would be very damaging to workers. And I think that Donald Trump definitely did fundamentally change the nature of the Republican Party when it comes to economic policy. For example, I remember when Republicans were in favor of free trade before Donald Trump, but then he came in and he was advocating for tariffs, obviously starting the trade wars. So definitely is a contentious area, but I'm not convinced that that would lead to these sort of loss of jobs, because in 2016 we didn't see that.
I think it's more or less of a loss of jobs and more or less the American people paying more. I mean, just look at how many products in our country are made not in America. You can go to Walmart and you can go and see all the different clothing and even things that I enjoy, such as Lego. That's not an American good, but the American people like enjoying non-American things. Even this suit that I'm wearing right now was made in Vietnam, for example. I mean, if we wanted to start buying American goods, then that means we might as well just start buying anything. No more Nike shoes for the American people, no more jersey, no more basketball jerseys, no more baseball caps, no more anything, because so much of our product is from outside of the country, and this is going to do nothing but just harm the American people who want to. The point of being an American is being able to have the freedom to go and buy whatever we want and enjoy ourselves. And so if these tariffs get put in place, we won't be able to do that anymore because everything will be even more expensive than it already is with the inflation.
Right. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine. I completely agree with you in that fact, especially because we don't have a comparative advantage in these goods. We do not have the infrastructure to produce these goods. That's why we outsource them. That's where that comes from. It's called comparative advantage. And when a country has a comparative advantage in a good, they're more likely to sell it because it's economically beneficial for them. And on top of that, like I said, we don't have the infrastructure to produce these goods. And so we import them. And when those imports get put in place, it's not only Americans who are going to suffer, but it's going to be people overseas who suffer as well. And something else I want to touch on is the mass deportation that he is threatening. That is going to drop our GDP. So we all remember the pandemic. We all remember the amount of jobs that were lost in the pandemic, how people couldn't work, so on and so forth. When you take a population out of the workforce, it is going to have an effect on the gross domestic product.
I think it is important to note it is a population that is responsible for most of the agricultural work in America. Undocumented immigrants make up a very good portion of the service industry as well in America. Two industries that are the American backbone. As you said, we are not a industrial infrastructure so much anymore. We are mostly agricultural out in the rural states and service in urban areas. So continue with what you were saying. I just wanted to make that clear.
Fine. So when you take this population out of the workforce, that is going to drop our GDP. There was rough estimate by about 9%. When that happens, depending on how long it happens, because recessions and depressions have to do with the amount of time it happens. I believe if it's 2 quarters together, that's a recession. We had one of those in 2020. It was smaller. It wasn't a long recession, but we're still feeling the effects of it.
Absolutely.
But a depression will go on longer. And if we cannot fill those jobs, there's going to be a depression. If we take that portion of the labor force out of the workforce, there is going to be a depression.
Yeah, so just to, I'll talk about immigration, just to go back to tariffs for 1 second. I think that it's fun. You may be right that we don't have the infrastructure to support making jobs here in America and manufacturing and doing all of these things, but I think Donald Trump's point is that we should do that because it's much better, I think, to rely on the manufacturing of goods here than it is in countries that employ slave labor to manufacture those same goods. Now, as it relates to immigration, I don't think that Donald Trump is actually going to, nor do I think he will be able to, employ mass deportations. I think more likely what it's going to be is a case-by-case scenario wherein immigrants, illegal immigrants who are a net draw on taxpayer dollars or who have committed crimes or anything of the like are going to be deported. But I don't think that there's actually going to be mass deportation. I don't think that that'll ever go through.
Well, his press secretary just said yesterday on, I forget what news channel, but I remember watching it where she said day one, we will be putting in the largest mass deportation system in the United States history. I mean, he even talked about it himself, using local law enforcement and the National Guard to go into these people's homes and send them back where they came from. And I also do want to point it out, when he talks about, he always says the word Mexican when he talks about immigrants. Oh, we got to get the Mexicans out of here. He is not just talking about the mass deportation of Mexicans. He's talking about the mass deportation of Mexicans, Dominicans, Nicaraguans, El Salvadorans, all Hispanic people who all work and live in the U.S. to help, as MJ said, build the backbone of our economy. So don't let the fact that he says, oh, we're going to get the Mexicans out of here. He means everyone, every Hispanic person that is here in the United States illegally. If anyone wants to pick up on that.
Yeah, I think it is also very important to note that Vance, when asked about who what an illegal immigrant is, what that necessarily means, who is going to be deported, was not able to give a clear, definitive answer on what the qualities of someone who would be deported are. I think that is very dangerous when you are just very openly signing an open letter to mass deport a group of people who are a net taxpayer disadvantage. Many companies, many Americans who are born here are a net drain on taxpayer dollar. I would argue that a lot of, I would argue Wall Street in 2008 when we bailed them out was a net drain on taxpayer dollar.
They're American citizens, though. They're not here without proper documentation.
Yes.
Helping the American people.
But allow me to just make one thing clear. He was asked if it would include people who were born here, and the answer was maybe yes. The children of immigrants might be getting deported. Completely getting rid of the backbone of what America is. If you are born here, you are a citizen. Even Ronald Reagan strongly talked about how that is a backbone of the American identity. So I think undoing that precedent and that national core staple of our identity is very dangerous. Now, but before we wrap up here, I would just like to shift the focus a little to women's issues, as that was another big issue in this election. MJ, would you like to start with that?
Absolutely. So as we know, the House and the Senate have turned. We know that Trump has stacked the courts. And while Pennsylvania is presently a choice state, we have a governor's election within the next 2 years or so. So that may not have long-lasting effects. While he does not have a supermajority, he still has a majority, and there is a very real chance of a national abortion ban. And my genuine concern is for women in this country, women who need health care. And abortion, whether you agree with it or not, for medical or non-medical purposes, is women's health care. And when you take that away, there was a woman, I believe her name was Amber Thurman, I believe her name was. I may be wrong about that. But she bled out in a parking lot because no doctor would touch her without a court order. She's dead now. Women are dying. And it's a very real issue, and we can't just act like this moral superiority over this issue. I will very publicly say, personally, I don't think I could condone it for myself, but who am I to tell somebody what to do with their body, and who is the government to tell somebody what to do with their body? That is not their business, and I'm very concerned for women in this country.
I'm sorry, I think that concern is very valid, and I would like to get to your thoughts on it as well, but we are going to go to a quick break, and then we will be back for a final 3 minutes or so for discussion on our general thoughts on this election. Stay tuned.
I found hope in the midst of an overwhelming situation.
Alcoholism is a disease that can affect any family. Everyone suffers, but there is help and hope at Al-Anon Family Groups.
Al-Anon gave me my life back. I'm a better father and husband.
Are you in an overwhelming situation because of someone else's drinking? Al-Anon and Alateen can help. Local and virtual meetings are available. Maybe one could work for you. Call 1-866-200-0033 or visit alanon.org/hope.
Dear University of...
Thank you for your offer
To become student ID number 283471.
While I appreciate your desire
For my impeccable academic record,
I must decline the opportunity
to get a generic degree,
I've decided to tell my story.
to be a student, not a statistic.
I wish you good luck in the future.
as I embark on mine.
Welcome back to our post-election episode of Exploring Politics. Sorry to cut you off there, Des. Would you like to finish that, or that thought?
Just before I get to my final statements, I just want to say that going off to what MJ said about women's rights, that I missed the time when the Republican Party, the party that always preached about being small governments, being individual civil liberties, stay out of government, stay out of our lives. it sounds like they're going against that and being hypocrites. But that's just my opinion. And I'll get to that in terms of my final thoughts. I just want to say that I think this election showed that, and I'm sure many of you will agree, that the Democratic Party needs to make a change. I mean, we've had not even just Kamala Harris, but Kamala Harris losing the election, even an two-term incumbent Democrat like Bob Casey from PA will most likely lose his election by, last time I checked, 30,000 votes. So if this election is not anything, let it be a reminder and let it show the Democratic Party that they need to change immediately.
I think you're very correct in saying that. Something obviously has to change if you're not able to win election like this, where a lot of things are at stake. You probably have to switch up what you're doing and cover the bases of the issues. So now, Matt, would you like to give your final thoughts?
Yes, well, I would say that philosophically the Republican Party has been fairly consistent in its notion that the federal government should have less power. This is clear by the fact that in his first term, Donald Trump appointed judges who overturned Roe v. Wade, which unconstitutionally gave power to the federal government to determine whether or not abortion was legal or illegal. In doing so, he turned it over to the states, which is why I'm not convinced that Donald Trump is going to somehow have a country-wide abortion ban, because he simply didn't do that in his first term. Generally, I think what this election shows us, and what every election shows us, is that some people are unhappy with results. Some people contend results. This has happened on both sides of the political aisle. But after this election, I think we need to move together as a nation, say, okay, this is the guy who won. Mm-hmm. How can we come together and come together stronger?
Yeah, that does make sense. Now, MJ, would you like to give brief final thoughts?
I will say that I am very clearly upset with how this election went. However, like Matt said, it wasn't okay when it happened last election that we contended the results, and it will not be okay that we contend the results of this election. While there are recounts going on exclusively because it's a very close vote in certain elections, we have to accept the results of this election. And I would like to generally applaud Democrats for being peaceful about this. I expected nothing less, but largely speaking, I think we, especially as a party and a country, need to come together.
Yeah, I think on that note, very important to remain civil and peaceful, but always keep these discussions going. They're important to our democracy. Thank you for tuning into this episode, and have a nice day.